Hi, this is Denise Mathew, and today I'm going to make this 5 bead flower ring. It's a very simple ring. I've made 3 here. One here, I've made it with rondelle beads, or like a ruby, and this one is made with turquoise. Now the round beads actually work a little bit easier, but you can use whatever kind of beads you like. If you notice, if I use the smaller beads, it's much more delicate, and with the bigger beads, it makes a more chunky ring. So that's the difference between a 4mm for the turquoise ring, and these are about a 6mm. I used a 20 gauge wire for the bigger ring, and I used a 22 gauge for the smaller. And I also did a couple more wraps around the wires to give it a more rustic look. So let's get started. Working with a 22 gauge wire, probably about 1.5 feet. You'll have to adjust your wire based on the size of the ring you're going to make and the size of the bead. So you'll need more for a bigger bead and less for a smaller bead. I'm using 4mm turquoise beads and a 2mm pearl bead for the center. So just string on one 4mm, your 2mm bead, and another 4mm bead just right on the wire. Then you're going to position the beads right in the center of the wire. Then you're going to wrap it around the size ring that you want to make. So one wire is going to go up and the other side of the wire is going to go down. So you're not going to cross the wires in the back. Now you're going to add the next 2 beads. One bead will go on the top wire and the other bead will go on the bottom wire. Now the first part of making the ring is the most important part, and it's where you want to have all your adjustments just right, because if it isn't right, you're not going to have the flower shape. So it's important to keep all your beads together while you're going to try and wrap it. So while maintaining the size that you want of the ring, you're just going to pull the wires really taut and press all the beads together so you can see it's got sort of a flower shape. And then you're just going to take one wire, it doesn't really matter which, the top or the bottom, and just start to try and wrap around it. Now you want to keep your wire underneath the beads, and you're just going to go halfway around with one wire, and then it will almost come to meet the other wire, and then you go halfway around with that wire. And if you notice that your wire wants to ride up, just push it back down into place, because you want to make sure those wires are underneath the beads. This part of the ring takes a little bit of time, but once it's stabilized, it's easier to wrap. So just take your time with this and keep adjusting accordingly. So you're going to wrap halfway around again, and when they meet, go halfway with the other wire, and the same thing. If you notice, now the ring is much more stable, so it's much easier to keep wrapping around. So you're going to keep wrapping until you have as much as you want, and you can always push the wire down underneath the beads so that it's under the beads. You can also adjust the beads as you like to make them more flower-like by pushing them closer together. You can keep wrapping until you have about 2 inches of wire on both sides. If you notice, most of the wraps are underneath the beads and the beads are sort of elevated on the wraps, and that's the way you want it. Now that this is done, you have one wire on either side. Then just take the wire and wrap it right around the base of the ring a couple times. About, I don't know, 4 or 5 wraps. It's really whatever you choose. Some people like to wrap it really far down. So I'm just going to do about 4 or 5 wraps. I'm going to do that on both sides. And just push the wraps together so they're nice and neat. I have a little more wire than I want, so I'm just going to trim it off and then just tuck it in, make sure there's no sharp parts, and I'm going to do the exact same thing on the other side. The last thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to put it back on the mandrel, because sometimes when you're wrapping it, it can come out of shape. And this is also a time that if you want to size it up, you can. Then you can take a hammer and you can gently tap on it, and that will size it up as well as wire harden it. And then your ring would be finished. So that completes the tutorial. I hope you liked it. If you did, please like, share, subscribe, and comment. We'll see you next time. Thanks for coming. Bye for now.